everyone. Welcome to this week's Karma Cards. How's it going? Well, we're in the middle of Mercury Retrograde. I've definitely experienced my share of, it's always technical with me, or electrical this time. So I'm experiencing my share of electrical issues. How about you? How's Mercury Retrograde treating you? We're in this until October 2nd, and then we move in out of its shadow completely by October 16th. So we're almost at the point with which Mercury Retrograde will go from Libra, which is the sign it's currently in right now, back into Virgo. So we're going to feel sort of a change in flavor inside this Mercury Retrograde. We'll see how it goes. That happens on the 23rd, which is tomorrow. So I'll see you then. We'll see how it goes. Also, we have a new moon coming up on Sunday. Sunday the 25th is the new moon in Libra. So now the sun has moved into Libra, and we're having that full Libra experience. Remember, this is about harmonizing, balancing, partnerships, beauty. It's a lovely sign to be in, and it's right there with the autumn equinox, which is happening tomorrow. My dates are all messy, and now time is messed up, and we're going to talk about time later. Tomorrow is the 22nd. That's the autumn equinox. The 23rd is when Mercury moves into Virgo. The 25th is the new moon in Libra. There it is. A lot of people love this time of year. Fall is one of my favorite times of year, and I think it has a lot to do as well with the transition into the Libra energy, because again, it's very harmonizing and balancing. It's the focus of that sign, of that energy, and it's the sign of the mind as well. So the mind naturally wants to move into harmonizing, balance, and cooperation, which always feels good to be inside. So hopefully you're feeling that sort of more balanced, more harmonious energy. And if you want to work with me during this energy, you can join us for the New Moon Spirit Circle. I'll put the link here and in the description below, where you can join us for manifesting with this particular energy, as well as healing and psychic Q&A. I love doing that, and that's coming up on Sunday the 25th. I hope I get to see you there. So now let's go into the message the team is bringing me this week. And what they want to share with me is a reminder to you that you are actually a master of time. Yes, you are. You're a master of time. We are all masters of time. It might not feel like it. It might feel like time is outside the realm of your control, but it's actually not. It's actually something that you are a master of. So they often say on the physical plane, right? We hear time is an illusion. And that's because outside of the physical plane that we're currently on, this third density going into fourth density experience, time is slower here. It feels more linear, like things are happening in a certain order. Whereas when we get outside of this plane, when we move into the greater cosmos, we experience time in a very different way. It's not quite what we're experiencing here. There is still a pattern that things happen in, so a sequence of events. But as far as what time period is, what time, like it's all one, right? So that's where we get into the quantum field, the field of time. What makes you a master of time? So if time is an illusion, and we live in a world that's technically illusory, meaning it's not really all there is. It is an experience inside of a bigger experience, is a good way to look at it. Or I like to look at it as like a simulation versus the bigger, the greater reality. Just by being inside this, you already have mastery over time. What makes you a master of time? Your ability to access the past, present, and future. So the past is something that you have already lived, you feel you've experienced it, and therefore you access it through memory. But you can also access memory that you have seemingly forgotten. This is where we get into past lives and being able to access information stored in different time periods and different lifetimes. That's one of the ways you're a master of time. You're a master of time in the present. First, you get to delegate how you use your time, but you can also extend time and shorten time. So how do we do this? I know that you've done this, and I could show you how you can do this. If you want to extend time, make time last longer, you simply focus on time. Anybody who's made, like anytime you make cookies and you're ready for those cookies, or a cake, or anything that you're anticipating, you're watching time. And what happens is time feels like it's taking forever because you're literally extending time by directing your consciousness at it. And you can also collapse time and speed it up by taking your attention completely away from consciousness. For example, when I'm painting, 5 hours can go by and it feels like 20 minutes. It always feels like 20. Why is it that it always feels like 20 minutes? I don't know, but that's my number. It's always 20 minutes. That's how you collapse time, right? So it's like if you want to make things go faster, have fun, or just don't focus in on time. And that's one of the ways that we can control time in the present. So here's a fun example. Do something where you have to focus on time. Like set a timer for 30 seconds and do an arm plank, right? Do some planks. You're going to feel like that 30 seconds takes forever. You can also set a timer for 30 seconds and go have a conversation with someone you really enjoy, and it feels like it was 5 seconds. So there's a little experiment you can do just to prove to yourself that you are a master of time. You also have mastery of tapping into the future. You can go into future time and observe. And we do this all the time. It's not such a woo-woo thing as people like to make it out to be. Anytime you're considering a path, you do this. You will project yourself into the future and watch how a certain choice plays out. And then you'll watch another choice play out. And that's usually how we make big decisions, is we actually move through time and space and sort of watch how an event plays out, how it unfolds. So these are just a couple examples of how you master time. But there's an even bigger example that is lesser known. Although I've talked about it before on this channel, you can definitely find videos inside my YouTube channel that talks about the manipulation of timelines and how we're the ones doing it and we don't even realize it. And that is because it's something that negative timeline group that I've also talked about before, they don't want you to know. They want to be able to use your ability to move timelines without you knowing you're doing that. And this is through the power of suggestion. So we can do this individually and we can do it collectively. And most of the time when it's being manipulated on a collective level. We will be told to expect something. We will be shown something. We'll be shown it in films or shows or books or stories. And then we will be told to expect something. And in that way, they're using consciousness as a way to manipulate what timeline we end up on. So there's a big reason why they don't want us to know. Now, this is something I think that actually gets kind of laid out pretty well, like inside the Matrix movies. I'm pretty sure they tap on it there. But it's something that I think a lot of times we tend to overlook. We're told we have no control over that. That was a lie. You do. You absolutely have an ability to move yourself through time. This actually comes up a lot in quantum healing hypnosis sessions, which is why I love it. And I also became a practitioner of quantum healing hypnosis because it's fascinating. When doing sessions with people, we literally move through time periods and we're picking up details and information, but we can move through present day timelines. Now, this is where you're going to have where we really do need to have a larger conversation about just how many timelines they are. But for the sake of keeping this fairly short, let's just agree with that there are an infinite number of timelines, because there are, and they're sort of on a spectrum. They're sort of the best, there's the highest timelines and the lowest timelines, all the way down to the sort of death cult negative timeline, the worst timeline, all the way up to the most positive paradise timeline, and then infinite number in between, variations. And we are moving across these timelines all the time. Now, sometimes we shift individually, which is very, very common. Other times we can shift as a group. When we do shifts as a group, this is where the Mandela effect comes into play. And I've also talked about this in the past too. So if you're not familiar, look up Mandela effect on YouTube, and you can find a whole bunch of videos explaining it and showing you actual examples of the Mandela effect in action. But basically, it's when a timeline shift has occurred, and some people remember the old timeline, and some people only remember the new. I know one weird example, you guys can type in the chat and let me know which one you remember, is Smokey the Bear. Smokey the Bear was a character that was used to help us understand how we can prevent forest fires. On the old timeline, on the timeline that I'm from, it was always Smokey the Bear. And apparently after, I don't know if it was like in the 2000s, early 2000s, 2015, somewhere in there, we shifted to a timeline where it became Smokey Bear. So what do you remember? Smokey the Bear or Smokey Bear? Smokey Bear sounds weird, like it doesn't sound right. And here's how you know that it was a shift, is a lot of times culturally we have references that will allude to the other timeline. For example, in an episode of The Office, Pam mentions it's the episode where what's his name? Ryan is getting upset because he thinks Smokey Robinson died. And he's like, oh, I can't believe Smokey's gone. And Pam goes, Smokey the Bear? Which alludes to, at the time of that filming, that was the timeline we were on where it was Smokey the Bear. And now apparently it's Smokey Bear. So anyway, getting back to it, we can shift to different timelines. Going back to the QHHT stuff, many times Dolores Cannon got material from people where they had experiences where, let's say, and these are some extreme experiences, that this is not usually what people experience. In fact, just to digress for a second, the shift is usually so subtle that you almost don't know it happened. That's how subtle a timeline shift can be. In these cases, there was a case where a woman had gone into like a store, and it was like, I want to say it was in the 90s. So let's say it was like 94, 96, around that time. She goes into a store in her neighborhood, and it looks the way she expects it to look. And she comes out, and everything looks like it's the 1950s. Like the cars look 1950 style. The buildings are, some buildings are gone. The buildings look like that time period. And everything was happening, and she literally just went into a store and came out onto another time point. And I can't remember how it resolves, but it resolved like where, you know, she maybe moved to another point, and then once she moved to that point, she was back on her timeline. And that's a more extreme example, but they do exist. So when I say that we're masters of time, it does imply that we can do this consciously, and we can. Most of the time we don't, because most of the time we're not acknowledging mastery over time. We're in a time point right now where there's a lot of timelines. Some of them are resolving, and some are still options. And I've talked to people who are worried about, well, what if this scary option happens here? Or what if this event happens here? And the point I just want to make is you're a master of time. And all it takes is you moving your consciousness to the point you desire to be in. So it's as simple as choosing consciously what you'd like to experience. And yes, you're going to have to come back and keep holding it. This is something that I practice all the time. I want to be on the highest timeline. I keep choosing the highest timeline. It doesn't mean my brain is like okay, I'm done, I'm already there. Most of the time, yes. Every once in a while, I can feel the stress or anxiety get in and want to pull me over to another timeline. But this is where you have to, again, make a conscious choice of like, no, I don't consent to that. I'm over here. This is the timeline I choose. And then we'd have to take actions that mirror your belief that you're on that timeline. For example, if you really thought the world was coming to a catastrophic end, that's the timeline you're choosing. So what actions are you going to take if the world's coming to a catastrophic end? Maybe you end up building yourself a bomb shelter. Maybe you end up giving away all your worldly belongings and moving to a mountain. I don't know, but you see, like, you're basically calling in what you expect. That's how we do it. That's how we move and master time. So the same is true in the other direction, that what are you focusing on and what actions are you going to take that align to that frequency? So this is just something for you to like mull over and think about. And also question, like, do you believe that you're a master of time? Do you believe that it's an illusion and it's something you actually have more control over than you recognize? Or do you believe it's more of an energetic that's bigger than you and you're sort of at the whim of? Because again, we get to create the reality we choose. And there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe it feels too overwhelming to have so much control over how time works. Maybe it feels freeing. It's just something for you to tap into and consider. But the message wants you to know that you have more mastery over it, more finesse over it than maybe you give yourself credit for. And with that, let's do the karma cards for this week. All right, so if you're new to karma cards, let me quickly show you how these work. I have 3 decks here: planets, signs of the zodiac, and the houses of astrology. And I've already asked my team, what is the message you have for us this week? And I got 2 sets of answers. A set in red, which are action related, and a set in blue, which are outcome related. And the way that you play is you tune in with your beautiful intuition and you decide, what do you need this week? Do you need some action related guidance, or do you want outcome related guidance? And of course, you can always choose both. And while you're choosing, let me tell you the timing for this reading. This reading is for September 21st through September 28th. And the flavor of this reading. All right, so they shook it up. Last week and the week before we had similar readings. This time we got something new. This time we've got the moon. The moon is very much about our emotional state in the sign of Capricorn and in the 10th house. And the reason I present these together is because Capricorn rules the 10th house. So it's very much about goals, it's about outcomes, it's about your external world experience and how you're showing up in the world. Oftentimes the 10th house is also related to your career. So let's see what it has to say. The spiritual action at this time is to cherish your goals responsibly. The word responsibly comes from the base word of respond. So it's all about how we respond, right? So cherish your goals responsibly. Respond to your goals, right? And this goes very much in line with what I was talking about when it comes to like choosing your timeline. Your future point is a goal, right? It's not happened yet. It's something you're moving towards. So remember that you have the power to create it by how you choose to take action. And so it's really why, I love that it's kind of tying in, because I want to embrace time mastery. I think that's a really powerful standpoint to take. It doesn't mean I can master everyone's time. If we're all masters of this, then we're also contending with the fact that, in your own world, you have that mastery. When you add other people, you're working within a mastery. So your input matters, but it's also affected by the input of others. And then this is where we start working with, as we work together, we're more powerful, which is why that's often used against us by that negative group. Because if we knew how powerful we were, the game would be over. At least that level of the game would be over. So they don't want us awake to that. But we can awaken ourselves individually And we can also work within groups of awakened people and create quite beautiful change in doing that. So cherish your goals responsibly. Realize that those goals are attainable based on the choices and the actions you take towards them. Mental action. Enjoy the day-to-day reality of success. I was talking with a client and we were literally talking about this, about how a lot of times success is an outcome that people are moving towards, that they're like, I will be successful when. And we're shifting the mindset to, I have success now. It literally changes how you move through time and towards your goal if you start seeing how you're successful now. A lot of times with goals, we can kind of get laser focused on an idea, like a certain thing has to happen for us to experience success with a goal. It's important to recognize the markers of success around you now, because as you see it, you make different choices based on what you're aware of. So if you're constantly feeling like you're not getting it, then your choices are going to be coming from that mindset, and they're probably going to fall short. Whereas if you recognize the success you have now, as you're moving towards what you want, your actions and your choices are going to be based on the recognition of your success so far, and you're going to create more. Physical action. Charm, art, and beauty are the way to use the most business-like way and become a person of power and status. So again, it's like you catch more flies with honey, is kind of what this is saying. And that's actually the most business-like, that's the strategy that's going to lead to your success. So again, it kind of ties into what it was just said, where it's how you're focusing becomes the strategy you use that will guarantee success or lack thereof. So they want you to realize that the finessing, the cooperation, the finding what's beautiful, finding what's working is the most business-like way forward. That's the strategy forward that's going to lead you to the success you're seeking. And the success is dependent. You can look at it as career, or you can look at it as something you're trying to move towards and create right now. Let's look at outcomes for Venus. Oh my gosh, the whole time I've been talking about it as if it's the moon. Because look at this card. It totally looks like the moon. It's Venus. This makes more sense. This is actually the ruler of Libra. So everything I said still applies. It's just more of, so Venus and the moon have a type of like emotional connection. This just represents more of a divine feminine. The moon is also a divine feminine energy. This is just the moon sort of on steroids, like more powerful. Okay, so Venus in Capricorn in the 10th house. The spiritual outcome at this time is the attraction of dedication to achieve your destiny. So again, this is like inside this harmonious, more focused, more powerful energy comes the dedication, right? So when we're thinking about things in a more positive light, we're obviously going to find ourselves more dedicated to creating the outcome. It's a really simple concept that we all understand, and yet look at if you're using it. See, this is where it kind of falls down, is like we understand the concept, but we don't always apply it. In this time period, if you follow those actions where you're applying it, you're going to receive that better feeling frequency that creates the dedication you need to create your destiny. Mental outcome at this time, pleasure from focusing on where you are going. Yes, this ties in directly to the mastery of time and choosing consciously the timeline you wish to be on. So if you're in a place right now where you're like, oh, I don't know how this is going and looks scary, ask yourself, is that where I want to go? Probably not. So now you need to consciously choose where you are going. Think about what you want to experience. And a great way to do this is to get out of your head and into your heart, right? So get into your heart space Usually 5 or 6 deep breaths can help you do it. Close your eyes and really feel. Is it as scary as you think it is? Most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, there's a peace or a goodwill feeling radiating from you. Trust that, because that actually is pointing at destiny. It points at where you're going. So as you tune into that, you'll notice that it feels better. Focus on the timeline you desire to be on, because that's the one you're going to go to, especially if your choices and actions are in alignment with it. Physical outcome, good times resulting from the rules imposed by your career. So Capricorn's ruled by Saturn, which often talks about rules and structure and limitation. Limitation sometimes gets a bad rap. We often associate limitation with lack, but it's not always true. And a great example of this I use a lot is when it comes to art. So artists, especially artists who have really honed their skill, understand the power inside limitation, that you actually create more when you put limits on yourself. And this might be limit the amount of mediums you use, limit the amount of colors you use. I'm only going to use my non-dominant hand, or I'm only going to, there's all these like cool limitations that artists will purposely place on themselves to create stronger work. And you can really see it if you have an eye for looking at it. You can really see how an artist works within limitations, especially when it comes to color palette, or a genre, or a certain look. These are all self-imposed limitations, but they actually create the outcome, a stronger outcome. Within limitation, we get more creative. This is why, and again, I'm speaking as an artist, but if you were to put every paint color in front of me, it actually can feel overwhelming and sort of stop the creative process, because it's like there's too much. What do I do? This is where we get rainbowitis and we just like paint rainbows all the time because we got everything. When you only give an artist 3 colors, now the artist has to get creative. They have to start thinking about like, how would I use these colors? What color represents dark tones, light tones, mid tones? And I know I'm speaking artist speak right now, but it really helps me illustrate, pun intended, how limitation is not the same as lack. It's literally the structure in which creates a more focused type of creation. So understand, I think part of this message is make that nuanced difference between limitation and lack. They're not the same thing. And anytime limits are imposed on someone, they get more creative, which means more of your creative being essence comes through because of the limit, right? And in terms of the 10th house talking about your career, this works anywhere. So it definitely works within career. This is why a lot of business coaches talk about niching. That's putting a limit on yourself. It's saying I only talk about this to this group, right? Like I'm not here telling you about health and diet. That's not the niche I'm in. I'm talking to you about metaphysics and quantum healing hypnosis and psychic cool things, like all of that. That's what we're talking about. That's niche down. That's a limit, right? So it only helps you get stronger. The limit, whatever it is, limits in your relationships, limits in your career, limits in your style. It applies everywhere. That the more you have that structure, the more creative you become. And I'm sure you could find a way to test it out. If you are an artistic type, you guys know what I'm talking about. If you're not, cook with something where you're limiting the number of ingredients that you use. Like you can only make a meal with 5 ingredients. Go. You're going to notice how creative you get. And you might create something that's freaking delicious in the process. So I hope this karma card's made sense. I hope it gives you something to think about. You are a master of time. I stand by that statement. You're a master of time. But do you accept it, right? And free will is a big part of this. It's really interesting because in that book of secret wisdom that I've talked about before, They talk about time as, it would be very different if free will didn't exist. You actually wouldn't be able to control future as much because it would already be set for you. The thing about time and the future is there's so much pliability in our future because of our free will. You are gifted with free will. That means you are the power source in your life. And therefore, you can do anything with your future. And that also makes you a master of time. Until next week. Thank you for watching. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so that you know the next time I release a new video. Until then, stay magical. Hi, my name is Therese Tucker, and I want to welcome you to Mercury Pod Coaching. I created this group coaching program to help you move out of procrastination and into traction towards your big goals. I know how it feels to dream really big and then all of a sudden find yourself sitting there spinning in place, not getting anywhere closer to your goal. It can be really easy to get caught up in feeling flustered and confused and not know what action to take, and so you completely stop taking any action at all. If this sounds familiar to you, then there's a good chance that you've got some mindset blocks in the way that are preventing you from taking actions right now that can get you closer to your big dream and create real change in your life. Here's what you need. You need someone who can see those mindset blocks and help you get out of indecision, move into inspired action, and do it quickly. And that's where I come in. So what is the Mercury Coaching Pod? It is a 30-day coaching program where you will have weekly coaching calls live with me to help you implement your plans and take action now. In this group coaching program, you will also get one private session with me where we can completely deep dive into what it is you're trying to create, and I can help you create the action tasks that you're going to need to complete in 30 days to get ahead. If you're ready to jumpstart your goals and get going right now, then you are the perfect person for this pod coaching program. So if you're interested, hit the Get Access button below. And of course, I look forward to seeing you in the Mercury Pod Coaching Program. All my love. Mwah.